In our Laser Jackal helmet breakdown last show, Fatty, you mentioned as your favorite feature the fit system, the dial at the rear where you can adjust the helmet's hold and adjust that system's vertical positioning.
Yeah, that's right, Hottie. I hate to use the word dialed when talking about an adjustment dial, but that is exactly what you can achieve with the Jackal's fitting system. It's perfect retention and positioning, so when I go out and I ride, there's no slipping or fussing. It's just a helmet that I forget about because it fits so well.
Now, that feature does have a name, by the way. Laser calls it Turn Sys. And Turn Sys is a more conventional way of holding a helmet to the rider's head, but it's not the only fitting system you'll find in the Laser lineup. Laser's better-known retention system is Roll Sys. Now, Roll Sys is the dial that is embedded on the top rear of the helmet.
Yeah, Roll Sys is Laser's unique fit system that prevents hot spots or pressure points by making the adjustment around the entire circumference around the head. It's kind of like a basket for your head that pulls from all sides for a more uniform retention. The system is found on Laser's road helmets as well. One of the bonuses of Roll Sys is that if you have long hair and need a place to route a ponytail, Roll Sys makes it easier to do that. Not that I would know, although I guess, there have been times when I wish I could have, but hasn't been for decades. But Lisa does wear a ponytail when she rides, and she loves this. Having the Roll Sys on her helmet makes her life much easier.
Yeah, the Turn Sys, Roll Sys features are just another reason we love Laser. They know that there is no one-size-fits-all solution, so they offer as many options as possible. They have some helmets with their Kineticore anti-rotational impact system, for instance, and some with MIPS. They have Turn Sys and Roll Sys, and you can see it all at lasersport.us.
3, 2, 1.
Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race, presented by Shimano. You can find that at bike.shimano.com. This is Season 5, Episode 16 of the show that breaks down, builds up, gets you ready, and freaks you out for the highest, hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country. I am Michael Houghton, Hottie to most.
And I'm Fatty. We've covered 75 miles, and now the race begins. That's right. The final 30 miles of this race are where buckles are truly decided, and those miles start with a very tough section of tarmac and usually some wind.
Ah, yes, the boulevard of broken dreams between Pipeline and the bottom of Powerline. And we are also opening the Leadville Tech Shop for the second time this season to talk about an emerging trend, at least at Leadville, and that is dropper posts.
Hottie, I have a pressing question for you. Do you always wear bib shorts when riding, or just when on the road, or when you're racing?
Well, if the ride calls for a chamois, then yes, it's always bibs. They just hold the shorts up better and in place. But how about you, Fatty?
Well, it kind of depends on the ride, the weather, the intensity. If I'm just on the road, then, riding alone, or if it's hot outside, then for sure, I'm going to be having bibs on, and it's going to be DNA bibs and a close-fitting DNA jersey. But for when I'm stopping or just having fun, or if the weather's getting cooler, I found I really love these DNA free ride baggies, which I wear over my bibs. They're exactly the right fit for a mountain bike ride. They're a little loose, but not so baggy that the crotch hangs up on the nose of the saddle, which I hate and terrifies me. I'm combining these shorts with the DNA free ride jersey, which is the same kind of technical fabric you'd expect from DNA, but it's a loose pullover shirt with a 3/4 sleeve. It's a little less nerdy than riding in a tight jersey on days when you're just out riding for fun.
Well, who says tight jerseys are nerdy? We're just sporty, aren't we? I mean, that's really what we are. We're aero, we're sporty, we're performance. But so are baggies, too. I mean, the way DNA makes them, total performance, total class in those things. And you can find both the free ride gear and the nerdier cycling clothes, as Fatty says, over at dnacycling.com.
Premium, quality, affordable prices, award-winning designs from the USA. These products are made in Italy. You really can't beat DNA.
Every part of this course kicks you in the teeth.
This is the course. We are taking you through what you need to do to have the best possible day on the second Saturday in August, from that shotgun blast to the moment you roll up the red carpet and that little 105 miles in between. Feel free to follow along on my Strava of the course from last year, which you will find on leadville.fm/Strava.
Last time on the course, we pulled into the pipeline aid station and left you staring at power line in the distance, but not to be overlooked, and we're about to discuss this, is the paved section that takes you to the bottom of power line. It's a little uphill, it's more likely into the wind, and it's where buckle dreams can fall apart.
Oh, yeah. This is a section that gets into my head, Hottie. You're 75 miles into the Leadville 100, but we've said many times before that the rest of the race, the first 75 miles of this race, is just to soften you up for the final quarter of this event. This is where the race gets brutal. And even the parts that look easy on paper, like this one, can really beat you down. On paper, you have no net gain in altitude. You're just crossing the pipeline timing mat at 9,700 feet. You spend 5.5 miles mostly on pavement, and then you turn left at the power line climb, still at 9,700 feet. Should be easy, right? It's not. Hottie, last weekend on my long weekend ride, Lisa and I were riding together, and the subject of the hardest part of the race came up. And I was telling her that this is my least favorite part of the race. This flat 5.5 miles has damn near broken me more than once.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's probably not the hardest part of the race, but as far as favorite parts of the race, this is kind of down there at the bottom of the list, basically because of where it is and what happens to you. You're on tarmac. You're thinking I should be rolling so much faster, then the wind's in your face. You're like, darn, you're then trying to form a group here and no one's cooperating, and you just want to get to the power line and get that climb over with. So, yeah, some frustration here. Again, not really hard on paper, but some frustration. Now, I have a true story about this section of the race. It doesn't involve me, although I've had my struggles here. It involves a good friend of mine who I was actually crewing for one year. And he told me that he came out of the pipeline feed area, headed home, and got on that pavement and just fell apart and started bonking and having so many issues there. I don't know if he was bonking because he had a fresh feed, but started feeling so terrible in this section that he pulled over, stopped, and took a quick cat nap. I mean, like he said, he just kind of passed out for a few minutes. He rallied, woke back up, got on his bike, got back to the finish line, somehow still broke 9 hours, but that's how bad this section of the course made him feel.
Well, good for him for finishing, for sure, because there is a moment where you could either turn left and continue up the power line, or turn right and have an easy paved ride back into Leadville. Of course, that means a DNF, but it is on this part of the course that, I've talked about this before, where I had to pull over and threw up and had a rough time getting myself back into the game. The fact is, you are 3/4 of the way through an incredibly difficult race, headwinds, headwind, exhaustion, just not working together with people. It's a place where if you're going to feel bad, it's probably going to be here. I've had cramps on this segment too. We're kind of building this up, but the fact is, it's 5.5 miles, right? And we're making this seem bigger than it is. That might be partially because you're looking down long stretches of a pretty lonely road. You feel like you're not making a lot of progress, but you are, right? It's all in your head. You're doing great. Remember that. Don't take into what we are saying into account. It's just 5.5 miles of flat, and don't be demoralized.
Yeah.
You're going to make it.
Yeah, we're here to freak you out, and we do a good job of that at times, right? Even when it's just a section of pavement. But there are reasons why, this little section can be harder than it looks on paper. First of all, you're just tired at this point. Like, you're going, oh boy, this really is a hard race. Like Fatty and Hottie were right. This thing is hard, right? And I'm way up here at 10,000 feet. What a mess. Where did I get my own? So you're tired at this point. Again, we talked about this headwind. I would say, right, 75, 80, 90% of the time, this is a headwind or crosswind section. Never fun on a bicycle to be going into the wind or have one quartering you somehow. Working effectively together here with a group can be difficult because, by now the race is really dispersed and spaced out. So finding partners can be difficult here. And then finding somebody with the same amount of power you have in this section can be a challenge in this part too. It feels bigger than it is. Most of this race turns a lot. You're getting a long look at the road, everything that's ahead of you. That can be demoralizing. So you're looking down this long, lonely stretch of road, hoping you find somebody else. You feel slow, like you're not making any progress. Yeah, because actually it is a little uphill. Your tires just feel like they're dragging along here. It all gets into your head. You're actually doing great. So don't let this thing totally demoralize you.
Yep, 100% agree. So let's go ahead and break this part of the course into some bite-sized, easy-to-consume chunks. So you're coming out of the aid station, maybe just very shortly, a couple hundred yards after you come through across the timing mat, you are going to hit a right turn and double track that is going to take you onto the road. That double track lasts for just about a mile. This we've talked about before, of course. It is generally pretty loose, pretty dusty, just depending on whether there has been rain recently. But you have 2 tracks to choose from, and there won't be oncoming traffic at this point. So pick your line and realize that it is going to change a couple of times during that mile.
You can actually get a good head of speed on that double track, too. It's a little downhill as you get to the pavement, which is called Half Moon Road. I didn't know. Thanks for the note there, Fatty. That is Half Moon Road, huh? I didn't know.
Here to help.
I know it's, everything there just seems to have a number out there. 9A, 9B, 9C. This is a Half Moon Road, which is great to have a name for a road out there. You're likely confronting, again, this headwind or crosswind as you make a left onto Half Moon Road off the double track. So just get ready for, maybe you want to get ready to lower your head a little bit, get ready for a little extra power to have to come out as you make a left on the Half Moon Road. That's going to be your enemy now for about 2 miles, taking you up to mile 78.
Yep. And you want to look for allies for that common enemy, the headwind, for that couple of miles. So look behind you, not just in front of you. People, of course, you can always try to bridge forward, but look for folks who are behind you. Maybe let them catch up and you can work together. Because this is often not just a strict headwind, instead of thinking in terms of a pace line that is just, front wheel to back wheel to front wheel to back wheel, think about an echelon, right? Where you are perhaps helping protect each other from that crosswind a little bit. Not everyone who you're going to be riding with is going to understand what an echelon is or how they work. But if you do, and the people you are riding with do, it can help you with a head crosswind in a way that makes a big difference to your ride. And that 2 miles is, it is time when you are preparing for the hardest climb of the day. So any help that you can get and that you can give to another is going to make a better race finish for all of you.
Yeah, don't kill yourself trying to make this echelon. They are very difficult. At the very least, just form a pace line and plow ahead. But if you've got some smarter riders and they know what an echelon is, maybe they've been watching the Tour de France or something, then fine, you can work one of those. But above all else, don't fry yourself trying to form one of these or ride this section, because you really have two. I mean, the work is really ahead of you. You have 2 big climbs, 2 downhills that demand your full attention. And of course, you'll end the race with that climb up the boulevard. That's a lot of racing still ahead of you. So don't mess it up here on this section of tarmac.
Yeah, that is a lot that is ahead of you. So you really do want to conserve on this section. It's the last place in the race, really, where you can conserve. So don't be a hero. And don't let other people be a hero if you can help it, right? There are some people who just naturally want to be the Clydesdale in a group, right? To pull the sleigh. And they are great at it, and they are wonderful people. But if they pull so hard that you can't hang with them, or they pull so hard that they fry themselves and blow themselves up and can't hang with you, they haven't done anyone any good. So if you've got someone who is pulling for more than 30 seconds, say, hey, take a break, get behind, let's stay together. And we'll get to the power line in a little bit better shape.
At mile 78, you'll turn left onto State Highway 300. This is the only way you can go. Well, you can go right, but don't go right. Go left. You'll come to a T intersection is what I'm trying to say. And you got to go left or right. Go left. Please, go left. And this is Highway 300, and this puts you in a different position as far as the wind is concerned. Good chance you'll still be fighting kind of a headwind, crosswind section in this area as well.
Yeah, and you're going to hopefully keep the people that you have accumulated, keep working together. A course marshal is going to guide you on every possible turn here. The turn the hottie just said is the one I was mentioning a minute ago, where if you turn right, you're going to Leadville, and you're going to miss a big climb, but you're not going to get a finishing that big buckle that you've been dreaming about for a year. So don't turn right. Now, when you get to mile 79, so another mile or so, you're going to, the road turns a little bit more uphill. You're going to bend right. And at mile 79 and a half, you're going to see the fish hatchery on the left. There's might be a few cars usually parked, cheering on the racers, a few people doing kind of informal feeds. I always see someone there. Sometimes there's someone puts a group together and is handing out Cokes or something like that. Always grateful when someone hands me a Coke here. You're hot, and boy, anything you can get right before the power line or during the power line, much appreciated.
Actually, Fatty, I saw a post on the participants page, I think it was, that the person who normally does Cokes at that area can't be there this year. So they are looking for somebody as of this date right now. What is this date right now? We are July 1st as we're recording here. So if somebody wants to help with the Coke handouts and the Coke hand-ups, I should say, they're at the fish hatchery, that would be much appreciated. But chances are you're going to see somebody out there.
I would love to be, I would love to contribute to the Coke Fund. If someone can do that, I will be on the course. But man, if someone can be out there handing up Cokes, boy, I tell you what, and count on my $50 to help pay for those Cokes. So the next 4 miles, you're going. Okay, so you're going to do 1 more mile after the fish hatchery, and then it is a left turn onto the power line segment. And that is an experience that is going to sear itself into your brain forever. And that is what we're going to talk about next time on the course.
Thanks to all who participated in our dropper poll on the participants page. I'll have to say, Fatty, I was surprised by the results. There were 3 options in that poll. One was, I plan to run a dropper post. Number 2, I plan to run a standard post. And the third option was, I plan to run a post with some type of dampening properties. We had 245 votes, and 135 said they plan to run a dropper at this year's Leadville Trail 100. Only 1 said they'll be running a post with dampening properties.
I'm surprised that there was even one. Back in the day, back when I first started doing the Leadville 100 25 years ago, you saw thud busters everywhere. I would say it's been at least a decade since I've seen one in the wild. But, that said, droppers, I see those everywhere. I know Lisa rides with one 100% of the time. I had one on a bike briefly a couple of years ago, and maybe I just didn't give myself time to get really comfortable with it. I'm a slow learner, hottie. You know that. It takes me a long time before I truly feel comfortable with any bike tech, and I have to have something basically be second nature before I would make it something that I integrate into my Leadville race.
That's a great approach, I think. There's no reason to change unless you know you're ready for that change. My dropper experience is limited, so far be it from me to tell listeners here what to do in this area. Instead, we have lined up some experts to help us sort this out. Let's start with a company that has been in the dropper biz for going on 17 years, KS Suspension. I got with Rick Taylor of KS at Sea Otter to talk about what a dropper can and can't do for you. I probably could have stopped at a number of booths here at Sea Otter to talk about dropper posts, but obviously KS catches the eye because of your reputation here. So let's talk about droppers and endurance mountain biking. As you know, this is the Leadville Trail 100 podcast. We're talking to folks who do a 105-mile mountain bike race. Mostly they're trying to keep their bikes light and nimble and so forth. First of all, let's make an argument for running a dropper in a long event like that. Mm-hmm.
Well, I think, riding position, comfort and efficiency is really important in an endurance event like that. So the dropper's going to afford you the ability to change up your position slightly. Depending on the terrain that you're negotiating, you may want a little bit more clearance between yourself and the saddle. You can steer from a little bit lower center of gravity. So the same arguments that could be made for other categories of use can be made, in an endurance event.
So tell us what happens when the saddle gets dropped to a lower position. What does it allow me to do, especially in downhill terrain?
So, if you come from more of a road background, the tendency is to kind of steer the bike with the inner thigh and kind of push through. But you're steering from a high center of gravity, and so that's not an ideal position to control the bike. If you're somebody that has kind of a BMX background, you learn to steer the bike more with your feet and a little bit less with the handlebar. And so by lowering the saddle, it puts you in a position where you can actually steer with your feet as opposed to steering with your inner thigh. And so that's important when the terrain gets steep or very technical. It just puts you in a better position to be able to negotiate that terrain.
Right, and how about in terrain where, again, Leadville doesn't offer a lot of switchback, single track stuff, but it does get quite rough and quite fast at times. Mm-hmm. Do you like a dropper in those situations?
Yeah, I think, the kind of cool thing about our product is it's infinitely adjustable, meaning there's no click set points that you have to set the saddle at. So if you're going over a rough section where you need to pedal to maintain speed, you can drop your seat maybe half an inch or an inch, and you can float a little bit on the saddle. So you're not completely removing the saddle from the equation, but you're moving it slightly out of the way where you can maintain control and a little bit higher level of comfort. Mm-hmm.
So tell me how it works. Now, to the real, I've rarely ridden on a dropper, just a couple of rides myself. What is the right way to operate one of these things?
Well, quite honestly, there's no wrong way to operate them. It's whatever works best for you. For me personally, what you were just talking about, rolling sections or rough sections, I like to drop it maybe an inch, and that gives me a little bit of float. Personally, I set my trail and my XC bike up to have the saddle slightly higher than my fully extended position that I'd pedal on flat. And the reason for that is when you're climbing a steep, you tend to move up on the nose of the saddle. In most cases, that puts you farther forward, so you're more centered up over the crank, which is a good position for power. You're naturally going to want to pull yourself up there when you climb. But by being able to raise that seat up a little higher, you're not struggling or pulling back to try to keep yourself centered over the crank. That longer extension allows you to get just a little bit more power out of your stroke when you're climbing.
Now, so traditionally, I think we've all thought of droppers for the downhill gang, the enduro gang, those people that really need to get the bike and the saddle out of the way. They were burly, they're thought of as heavy. How has the product evolved to meet the needs of endurance riders, gravel riders? What are we seeing now that says, a dropper can, I'm talking about product development, a dropper can be a perfect match for an endurance or an XC mountain bike? Mm-hmm.
Well, we've sponsored several XC Pro teams over in the European race circuit, and we learned a lot from them as to what their needs are at that high level of competition. And so we've integrated high level materials like carbon fiber mast, like titanium hardware, and gets our XC race post down around the 300 gram mark, which is about half of what most dropper seat posts are. So the weight penalty is really not there that there was in the past. So you get the benefit of the adjustable seat height without the weight penalty. And then we've also looked at, for gravel or endurance, having something to kind of take the edge off, to kind of the buzzkill, so to speak, is really important. And on a hardtail, you don't have anything on the back end of the bike to facilitate that. So we now developed a dropper post that has suspension, and it's an all-air system, so it's super reliable. But that's going to give a rider that's on the bike for a long period of time that little bit of extra comfort, and that's should relate to a little bit longer increase in performance. You just don't wear out.
Yeah. So how do I pick a dropper? Obviously it needs to match my seat tube diameter, and you have 27.2, which is pretty popular in the endurance mountain bike and gravel scene. What else do I need? What about height and all that other stuff?
Yeah, so we've actually got a sizing process on our website that'll lead a consumer through how to measure for their bike. If you have a bike fitter, it's a good idea to have them get involved with helping you set it up. But essentially, the critical things are to check the insertion ability in your frame. So you want to see how far down a post can go into the seat tube. A lot of XC and gravel bikes have modified or manipulated seat tubes, so they're not round straight down through. There's some obstacle in there. So that's something to check. You also want to look at how much of the post is exposed when you're extended, like in your normal pedal position. How much is extended out of the frame. And with those two measurements, that'll help you determine what travel and what physical configuration of post you need. And then I guess the next thing to consider is what your use is. You know, if you're racing, theoretically weight would be a major concern. Reliability, I think, is going to be a major concern. So, you probably, if you're racing it, you probably want to pick middle to upper range to have that performance and durability. If you're a novice rider or someone who's just getting into the sport, an entry-level post is probably going to work for you.
Yeah, obviously, endurance mountain bikers are really worried about failure. What do they need to do? Well, first of all, what's the failure rate like with a post, and what do I need to do to make sure it doesn't fail on me?
So, our failure rate globally on our posts for everything we sell is 0.5%. So the chances of you getting something that's going to fail on you are very minimal. But having said that, they are built by human hands, by human beings, and we're not perfect. And so a couple things to consider when you're getting a dropper is its track record, what's the reliability. The other thing to consider is ease of maintenance, because what usually contributes to a failure on a post is lack of maintenance. And so if it's a complicated open bath system that you have to take to your shop and they've got it for a week to rebuild it, and then you don't know that mechanic has a lot of experience with your particular seat post, you may or may not get something back that's as reliable as the factory built it. With our systems, they're all cartridge based. So you basically pull out a cartridge, you put a cartridge in. So it's got factory oil in it. All the parts are fresh from the factory and new. So anything that would cause a failure mode, when you replace that, is brand new. So that contributes quite a bit to the reliability. I think also we just developed a new seat post that has suspension and drop capabilities, and it's all air internally. And so for an endurance athlete that's really worried about reliability, there's no oil to leak out of it. They're super light. And because the suspension is actually taking a little bit of that edge, that hit that normally your body weight's constantly pounding that down for the 100 plus miles, it's easier on the rider because it's taking that impact, but it's also easier on the product. So the product itself, it handles the stresses of that kind of racing a little better.
The last time I broke a seat post, it was a carbon seat post. It was just a straight carbon seat post. It was not a dropper, so they break too. So the final question here, all things being equal, am I going to be faster on a dropper?
Well, you're going to have to pedal harder, but yeah, I mean, theoretically, yes. I mean, there's variables there, but I would say that a lot of what endurance racing is about is how fresh you feel that last few miles, how hard you can push yourself, and anything you can do to make yourself feel fresher those last few miles, you're going to put in a harder effort. So, yeah, apples to apples, I'd say the dropper's going to make you faster.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to do. Next, Leadville, I'm going to count droppers. Let's see how many are out there, and I'll let you know.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, in the comments section of our dropper poll, many people said that the reason they would not be running a dropper was the potential for failure. And I guess when they say failure, they mean having it get stuck in the down position. For those planning to run a dropper, many said they would because it was already on the bike and switching to our normal post is just too much of a hassle at this point. For those intentionally running a dropper, they said the ability to get the saddle out of the way for like the Powerline, Columbine, and Sugarloaf descents was reason enough to ride a dropper post.
Yeah, I will say that the fear of a dropper failing is a concern for me. I remember in the Silver Rush, I don't know, 4 years ago or so. So, the tech may have advanced quite a bit since then. But I remember about 35 miles into it, coming across a guy who was off his bike and cursing and screaming and yelling about the fact that his dropper had failed him. Back when this all happened, there weren't that many dropper posts in the market. Now it is a crowded field. Even if you narrow that down to short travel, cross-country droppers, there are a lot to choose from. There's the Fox Transfer, the PNW Rainier, RockShox, DT Swiss, Crank Brothers, and our friends at Pro Bike Gear all have droppers in this category. Now, you may have heard that our sponsor Envy recently dropped a dropper, and it is in their gravel lineup. We checked in with Envy's Neil Shirley to see if the G-Series dropper could handle a lap around Leadville.
So as we are speaking, there is a new product that Envy is going to be coming out with, and should be out by the time this show airs, the Envy Dropper Post. Tell me a little bit about that.
The Dropper Post is something that is probably one of our longest running projects in company history, and I'm being serious. You'd think a dropper, like how complicated could it be? But we went back and forth a lot on materials. We started with a full carbon dropper and found out that really carbon wasn't the best material for what we needed to achieve with a dropper. So this dropper, we call it the G-Series dropper post. So we put it in our gravel category. And we do that because it has 40 millimeters of drop. So kind of right in that sweet spot for gravel. Maybe not enough for a cross-country full cross-country racer. But, I know riders that are running, either they're still running, standard seat posts, or they feel that 40 millimeters would be fine for cross country for what they're doing. It's a very lightweight inverted design, so definitely some benefits with that. One, if you have a frame where you don't have much seat post showing, it will accommodate most of those frames. You can still run like bike packing bags off of it, seat packs not affected like you would with a standard dropper. Plus, with just crud and mud, you're pushing it away from the internals and the seals rather than it straight into it. So it's a product we're really excited about. It's great to see the gravel community adopting gravel droppers, and there's a lot of work still to be done, but I know for me, once I put a dropper on my bike, I was like, I can't ride a bike without it. And it's not just for the most technical terrain. It's truly anytime I'm descending, it just changes the center of gravity and how I can ride the bike.
Now, I can't help but apply the Leadville lens to everything I do. Yep. It's, call it a flaw or call it the topic of my show. But I, of course, am wondering, it's a lightweight dropper. It is on a fairly non-technical course. What do you think? Is it a good match for this race?
Oh, I think so. I think, honestly, if I looked at one type of rider or event, and if you're building a very specific setup for that to be as fast as possible, I think it's a perfect option. And really, where we landed on that amount of drop is so that when you're in transition moments, you can, when it's fully dropped, you can still pedal if you need to. It's not the most efficient pedaling position. Obviously, it's low, but you can do these transition areas and be on the pedals without having to re-engage the dropper.
Yeah. And what that makes me think of is actually the descent down from the final 5 miles of the descent down Columbine Mine, where you want to be low.
Yep.
And there are numerous opportunities where you're going downhill, but not super technical. And and there are places where it is a working descent. So it sounds like that might not be a bad match.
Yeah.
To this race.
Yeah, I would agree.
Very interesting. Okay, well, you and I are going to have more conversations about that. I can tell.
We'll have to get one on your bike, and you tell us.
I will tell you. I'll tell you and our listeners. All right, Neil, Always fantastic talking with you, catching up with you.
Yeah, it's great to be on. Thank you.
Thanks again to Neil and to Envy. So the G-Series dropper could be used, just not on all mountain bikes. Its length is 350 millimeters, so if you currently have a lot of exposed seat post, then the G-Series is probably too short. However, if you are a shorter rider, like say you're 5'7", just for example, and you're constantly fighting your saddle on descents, then the G-Series could be the ticket. I am slated to get one, and I will obviously be giving it the old college try. I got to say, though, the fact that it is Envy is what lends it a ton of credibility as far as I'm concerned. It is worth checking out the G-Series dropper post, which you can learn more about at envy.com, ENVE.com.
Thanks again to Envy. Another reason to have a dropper is seated descending. We saw this go down in Milan-San Remo, the road race this year, where the winner of that road race ran a dropper and used it basically for one crucial descent so that he could stay seated and get low on that descent. We kind of have similar situations on that morning descent around Turquoise Lake and coming down Columbine. You're mostly seated, and sure, you'd like to lower your drag and get your center of gravity down, and a dropper can help you do that. Like the people on our poll, pros have mixed views on running a dropper at Leadville. Rose Grant told us that while she wrestled with what bike to ride, a dropper for her was a no-brainer. So let's round out this dropper discussion with our go-to on this type of stuff, pro mountain biker and lifetime Grand Prix competitor, Payson McKelvin. So let's get to the third topic here we're talking about, and that's dropper posts. They are showing up in a number of places. They showed up on a road descent in Milan-San Remo. They're certainly becoming very popular on gravel bikes. Leadville, just on my scan there, I see more of them, obviously. Tell me about your dropper experience and when and where you like to put one on a bike.
I run droppers on my mountain bikes almost all year, with a couple of exceptions, and Leadville actually happens to be one of the exceptions. There's just so much climbing. I don't have a problem getting down power line fast, high posting. But if someone, even at the front of the race, like we saw Pete Stetina last year used a dropper just because he's more comfortable with it. And he's such a strong climber that he could more than overcome the weight penalty. So that's very much a personal preference thing. Day to day, I'm always using a dropper. I even throw them on my gravel bike sometimes for fun. But for Leadville, to this point, I've stuck with a high post.
And for the folks who don't run a dropper then, what are the things you have to keep in mind when you pull the thing out and you put a solid post in there and suddenly, okay, here comes power line descent. What do you got to keep in mind when you're doing that?
That's a really good point. So if you've been riding with a dropper post for a while and you want to save weight and run the rigid post for Leadville, definitely spend some time practicing because it feels so different. And a lot of times when I throw that rigid post back in, 2-3 weeks out to start practicing, I feel like I've completely lost my ability to handle my bike. Like it's such a staggering difference. So I would highly recommend planning ahead if you decide to do that.
It's funny, you and I are sitting here talking about these small little choices, but do you feel like they're becoming a bigger deal now? Look, we have this Grand Prix now. You folks are all on the spot now. There's going to be a lot of attention. Are we down to this now too? We're like, man, I just go out there and ride the damn thing. I got to be ready.
For sure. It's fun for that reason too. Like I really enjoy all of the little technical nuances of cycling. I think anyone that's a fan of cycling or enjoys cycling has to have some appreciation for all the equipment involved. And so these little performance gains that can be made by choosing different equipment, it's a super fun side of the sport for sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, good luck on the Grand Prix this year. We know you'll get better and get to it.
Yeah, thanks.
And we'll see you in Leadville.
Yeah, sounds good. See you there.
All right, man. Cool. Thanks.
Big thanks again to Payson for all of his help on our tech shows. Payson is a great follow on Instagram, and he has a podcast that guarantees that he will never be able to shave his mustache. It is, of course, the Adventure Stash podcast. Okay, the last answer in our poll was, quote, I plan to run a seat post with dampening properties. That got 1 vote. I was surprised it didn't get more, Fatty, and maybe the answer was just framed poorly in the poll.
What we meant to say is that I'll be running a post like a Cane Creek Thudbuster, which you mentioned earlier, or like a specialized Cobbler Gobbler. Those are the type of posts that take the buzz out, but they don't have any moving parts. Either way, this is an option for people looking to diffuse some of the vibrations at Leadville. Like we said, Cane Creek has the Thudbuster, and they have something that's much lighter now they call the E-Silk. Trans X has a post with 20 millimeters of travel, same idea though, and many of you probably have heard of Redshift. They make shock-absorbing stems and seat posts, and I got with Redshift founder Steve Onhart to talk about their seat post. So at Leadville, of course, predominantly what you see are hardtails, although full suspensions are making more of a push, but a lot of hardtails, flat bars, obviously, with front suspension. Despite the suspension pieces that folks put on their bikes for the Leadville 100, rider fatigue, especially through hands and through back sides, is severe, especially for our folks who are out there over 10 hours. It can be a game changer for them.
Yeah, the Shock Stop seat post is actually a really nice option for hardtails because it gives you 35 millimeters of suspension travel at the back of the bike. And it's, because when you stand up to pedal out of the saddle, if you're on a hardtail, you don't have to worry about, the effects that would have on your suspension. So it's much simpler. It's much lighter than a full suspension bike would be. And it makes a huge, huge difference in terms of just fatigue accumulation over the course of a long ride. With the seat post on there, there's just a lot of instances where you can just sit down and pedal through stuff where normally even on a hardtail, you'd need to be either floating your body up off the saddle or standing up. So really nice option if you're riding terrain where you don't need a dropper, which, for a lot of Leadville riders, a dropper is not necessarily something you need. The Shock Stop seat post is a really great option to just prevent that, your spine, your rear end from getting beat up from all those small impacts.
And as I understand, a lot of people may have seen your original stuff. You have a newer product out as well in the Shock Stop seat post?
Yeah, so the original Shock Stop seat post has an internal coil spring and 35 millimeters of travel. We also just launched a pro version of our Shock Stop seat post, which switches from a coil to an elastomer spring. And it has less travel, so it's a little bit firmer, racier feel, 20 millimeters of travel. And it drops 130 grams actually from the original post, so it's quite a bit lighter. Yeah.
And you can accommodate all or most seat post sides, seat tube sides, I should say.
The seat post is currently only available as a 27.2 millimeter diameter, and then we offer shims to fit, larger seat post diameters. Obviously, a lot of mountain bikes will be running 30.9s, 31.6s, but the shims work great, and there's no limitations in terms of the effect on the post.
If I put you in Leadville on a hardtail tomorrow, of all the components you have here, what would you, with a front suspension for it too? So you have the standard setup. You have a hardtail, it's got a Fox 100 on the front. What Redshift add-ons are you putting?
For sure, I'd be putting the seat post on there. That's a no-brainer to me. The difference in comfort, especially over longer rides, is just enormous. You end up feeling fresher at the end. You can ride faster. You save energy because you just don't have to spend as much energy, suspending your body. So that's a no-brainer to me. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot. And another option out there for folks who are going to be on the bike for a very long day.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's great talking to you, and to anybody who's racing Leadville, good luck out there. It's a tough race. I hope to do it one day myself. Although as a lowlander, I think I'd have a hard time acclimating to the altitude. But it's a once in a lifetime kind of thing, bucket list opportunity. So.
And finally, Fatty, companies like Ritchie and Syntace have high flex carbon seat posts that can also help kill some of the unwanted buzz. One note that I checked with Ergon on their leaf spring seat post, and they advise against using it for mountain bikes.
Yeah, I think at this point in the season, assuming that you're listening in early July, a month and a half before the race, you need to pull the trigger one way or the other in the next couple of weeks. If you've been riding with a dropper all season, don't go looking to shave a few grams off your bike's weight with a solid post right before race day. You'll miss the dropper on the downhill. I know Lisa would lose her mind without her dropper post. It's just part of how she rides now. If, on the other hand, you're like me and you still haven't moved to a dropper yet, it might be something to think about doing now or not doing until next year, or start using one the week after the race. So you'll have plenty of time to adapt your riding to whatever advantages the dropper might bring you.
Feed zones can be a crazy and confusing area, especially if your crew is feeding multiple racers. And we've heard the stories, racers getting the wrong feed, and worse yet, racers getting someone else's feed. Well, our friends at the feed want to help you clear up at least some of this confusion.
Yeah, the feed has announced a personalized bottle program. Now you can order bottles from the feed and have your name stenciled on the bottle. I've actually seen one of those with Melissa's name on it. It's very cool. The bottle is a Specialized Purist, the most popular one out there. And these bottles have the feed logo on them and your name on it. Now, the price per bottle may sound a little shocking, but there is a way to get a discount. So each bottle, $20. But with each order of $65 or more, the bottle becomes free.
Oh, now you're talking my language. Free. Well, not exactly free. I mean, you still have to buy the best sports nutrition anywhere, but as soon as your cart reaches $65, then add a bottle for free. And the way us bike racers eat, Fatty, a couple of free bottles, not too hard to achieve.
Not too hard at all. To get a personalized bottle, start by going to the feed, fill in your cart, hit that $65 mark or more, and then start adding bottles.
And don't forget about our sweet deal. Claim your $80 annual credit at thefeed.com/Leadville. Register your email, verify your phone number, then spend your feed credit of $20 right away. All right, let's wrap this episode. Fatty and I are on social media. He is on Twitter at FatCyclist. I saw you tweet something today, in fact. A very good tweet, in fact, about your enjoyment of the bicycle, no matter what.
Yeah.
Instagram for me at Michael Houghton. Of course, we are both on the Facebook Leadville 100 mountain bike participants page. That's a mouthful. That's where our poll was, by the way, and look for us there. We may be asking some more questions, so keep an eye out for us there. And if you need more Leadville talk, join our Slack channel. You'll find a link to it over at leadville.fm/Slack.
And if you like this show, go to wherever you listen, give us a 5-star rating and write a review. And you can see all the ways to do this over at leadville.fm. Good luck in your riding, your racing, your recovery, your eating, your thud busting. Thanks for listening. We're going to see you real soon at the starting line.